So hello, and thank you for coming to this amazing panel that we have about diamonds in the rough. So if you look for raw diamonds or diamonds in the rough in the internet, you can find a lot of amazing tricks to find diamonds from rocks, maybe using just a glass of water. But when we are talking about investment, when we are talking about how VCs find the best companies and how we can find this deal that can make us get this 100x over our investment, it is not that easy. But well, I have good news because we have this amazing panel today that will reveal their tricks or will not, about how to find the diamonds in a startup, so how to find this 100x. So, well, I'm going to ask you that very briefly could introduce yourself and the fund so that the audience can get to know you a bit more. You are very well known, I must say. But if you could just say in 30 seconds your fund size, any top 3 portfolio companies that you have, and the Spanish investments. So I'm going to start by you, Oscar.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Very glad to be back in person at last. So I'm with Rakuten Capital. We had about 4 billion in AUM. In terms of the verticals that we focus on, primarily it's platform businesses, so anything to do with e-commerce, digital platforms, and marketplaces, and then fintech. So effectively like the new generation or next wave of financial services. The investments are broadly worldwide, sort of split between the US, Europe, and Asia. Some of the memorable companies here in Spain specifically, we are one of the largest investors in Glovo, and now the darling of the portfolio. It's a US company, although it's headquartered between Madrid and London, and that's Fever. So for those of you who haven't used that platform yet, I do encourage you. Thanks.
Okay, so thank you very much. Let's go for you, Luca.
Thank you for having me. And again, nice to be back. Oscar is right. Nice to finally meet again in person. So I'm Luca from Axel. Axel is a global venture capital firm. I've been in the industry for 40 years now, with a local presence in Europe for the last 20 years. We do focus on everything early stage to growth stage. So I'm truly a multi-stage firm. We've been privileged to back quite a few notable global iconic tech businesses, such as Facebook, Slack, Spotify, or Dropbox. And in Europe, we've been, as I said, active for the last 20 years, primarily across 3 major verticals: software, consumer internet, and fintech. We've been proud investors in companies from every single country in Europe, I believe now, including Spain. So, for example, we invested in Wallapop, in Barcelona, or Carto, actually, that I think we will learn a bit more in a second, and in Fever. That's in short about Axel and me.
Okay, thank you. Miguel, please.
It's really hard to speak after Axel, right? So yeah, after dropping names like Facebook or whatever, yeah, great you said also Carto to keep the balance. So well, it's really great to be back here, as everybody mentioned. So. And I just changed gears 3 months ago, so I'm learning how to be a venture capitalist. So I hope I learn a bit in the panel. Before that, I was leading the entrepreneurship global area at Telefonica, and before that, I was an entrepreneur at Carto and other startups. And what I'm doing now as partner at K-Fund is that we are an early stage venture capital firm in Spain. 250 million euros under management, but we are now launching, and we just announced this 2 weeks ago, another growth fund, the biggest fund in the region, 250 million, also having Telefonica as an anchor investor. And the main idea is that we do believe there is still a gap, that the real maturity of an ecosystem happens when you also have local growth funds. It's amazing to have all the guys here who can also back companies and bring them to the IPO. But if you want to have this deep intimacy with the founders locally, and also the connections to the corporates that can bring revenues, which is the holy grail of growth, you need to have this kind of local growth funds to cooperate with. So super happy to launch that, and now fully in trying to find the investors and the entrepreneurs to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Miguel. So Lucille, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucille, I'm a partner at 8 Roads. We're a global VC fund, so we have offices across US, Asia and Europe, 8 billion under management and mostly investing in scale-ups. Spain has been great for us, so we're investors also in Wallapop with our friends from Axel, Redpoints in Barcelona or Packlink, to name a few.
Okay, perfect. So a lot of Spanish investment here, I can see. So, well, let me start a question where we are in post-COVID. So, how is deal flow going after COVID? So, have you seen any change in the valuations, the quality of the companies that you're scouting? So, which is your perception on this? So, well, I'm going to start by Lucille. So,
Yeah, look, I mean, I would start by saying, I mean, there's no better, been a better time to be an entrepreneur in Europe. And I've been doing this job for 10 years, and just the amount of change, even probably in the last 2 years, that the ecosystem has seen is remarkable. I was reading some data. I think they're saying this year 100 billion VC money is going to be deployed in Europe, which is 2.5 times last year. So just that acceleration is fascinating. And I think it's a great news for everyone. We see a lot more ambition from European founders. And you know, I feel very fortunate to be there for those entrepreneurs, like see people who say, I want to build a global leader here from Madrid, from Cordoba, from Barcelona.
If I may add just one little thing, and I fully agree with that, is a change we've seen now with COVID is that before attracting international talent was a bit more difficult. And maybe a CXO of an American scale-up would not be thinking about working in a Spanish startup. And now they do think so, right? They think they can work remotely and they can do a hybrid setup or just come to live in Madrid or Valencia. So that fundamental shift in how you see where you work, and that can change, and you need to be not physically in the same place all the time, gives an enormous opportunity for the Spanish founders and in the region. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not only that, I think I will add that the quality, going back to Lucille's point, the quality of entrepreneurs has definitely been increasing, but now it's also the quality of executives and people that have been working in the industry that has been increasing. So it's way easier for a company that is starting today to have more experienced people that you can pull into companies. And that has changed dramatically, and of course is helping the flywheel to accelerate.
Mm-hmm. But are you seeing, Oscar, that you have the view from the US, from Asia, that are valuations in Europe scaling as well as scale-ups? Are valuation growing as we try to acquire talent that is global? There is more competition, there is inflation in salaries from companies worldwide. Do you see any change in valuation?
Well, there's definitely a lot of inflation, right? That's at micro level, and it affects valuations as well. I think that in general, echoing what my colleagues have said here, there's a lot of capital out there. So definitely the industry is very well funded. The valuation expectations are also higher. So now we see rounds that you get like Series A or Series B rounds at around 50 million and plus, and that obviously requires more capital, and also more acceleration between different rounds and towards pre-IPO levels. Although at the same time, I guess like more companies are now heading for the exit via IPO in the market. What I guess as an observation, right, and to the prior point, what's kind of interesting is that we do invest in digital assets, and our own profession has become a lot more digital. By that I mean that, well, because of the travel restrictions around the world, you get companies now which are raising money with investors regardless of where they sit, and you can do everything with Zoom or WhatsApp, you name it. So we end up actually conducting diligence remotely as well, and also, which is now maybe not exactly the right thing always, because it takes away the human factor of meeting with people in person, right? But we've done deals without physically having gone to to a company, right? And everything's been done remotely, so fairly virtual. And that's like a new thing that came up with
There's
with
increased
COVID.
competition effectively, right? So when there's more competition, price tend to go up at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So yes, we've seen inflation for sure, Paul.
Yeah, and well, talking about competition, and this is a point that Miguel was raising when we were talking before in backstage. So we were promising the audience that we were going to share our secrets about how to find diamonds. But is it that common that fans tell each other how to find diamonds? Is there a real competition between you all? Do you share diamonds? Don't you? So Miguel, this is your turn to break the ice and be polemic if you want.
I would say the industry is quite cooperative, so fans do share information they can be sharing about companies, etc., which also generates a lot of FOMO, right? Oh, if this company or this VC, it's amazing how much time sometimes VCs spend talking about what other VCs are doing instead of thinking more about the startup itself. But I do think we are seeing this frenemies approach. Sometimes we are great friends, sometimes there's competition. I was thinking when you were talking before that this job of finding diamonds in the rough has changed from slowly mining and creating and finding the diamond and looking into it and finding the facets and getting the timed analysis into quickly, oh, this might be a diamond or not, I'm not really sure. What do you think is a diamond? Yeah, maybe yes, and then let's go for the next one. And so we have been preparing for so many years for the very creative mining job, and now we need to learn to go this full speed, much more higher risk, and where the power balance goes much more into the entrepreneurs, and that's a learning process. Yeah.
For sure.
But also maybe to add to that, I think I like the analogy of the diamonds, but it's more of a continuum. So I always like to think it's not obvious until it's obvious.
Yeah.
So you know, the more a company grows, the more obvious it is for everyone until you're like 80 billion listed company and it's very obvious, right? So a diamond is in the eyes of the beholder, and sometimes for us it's the question like, what are we seeing that others are not necessarily seeing, or are there things that lead us to think that this is going to be a great company? And then obviously, coming back to the valuations, the more that point become obvious and a founder is outstanding, the company is growing fast, the more everyone can look at it and say, wow, that's a great company, and obviously the valuation follows. But that's more of a continuum, I think.
Yeah.
And going back to that point, so have you seen a reduction on the time that you, how long does it take to give a term sheet to the entrepreneur? Have you seen changes along the years? So is this getting more and more competitive, and you are seeing also in your timings?
Indeed, of course. I think again is a reflection of what my colleagues just said, but I think it's also, you should not just be looking at the concept of a term sheet, in my opinion. It's all about how you end up there. So this market from the outside seems to be a black box of people that are chasing entrepreneurs and rough diamonds, but in the end there's a lot of research in terms of which are the trends, which are the people that you think are best positioned for cracking a market or bringing innovation to an old market. And sometimes your interaction with the company seems relatively small because you're only seeing the final piece, but before that there's a bit of internal work that is less about talking with other fans, it's more about reflecting of what you're looking for.
That's a very interesting point. If you really want to find these diamonds, you need to have your own vision of a future, right? And once you have defined this vision, hopefully the fans' vision, or at least the partner's vision of that future, then you need to find which teams are fitting that vision.
Exactly,
right?
and they're closer to what you have.
Exactly, which you might be wrong, and probably this team will then pivot, but at least you have a place to look for some, because it's not about waiting for somebody to come to you and pitch. It doesn't work like that. You need to be proactively finding which are the teams that could then fit that vision.
And a lot of it is also serendipity, right? So on the one hand, it's kind of like a film production. So no single fund will be just like throwing huge money for one venture only. You do want to have the best possible lineup, as we've been all saying here, and actually kind of like diversifying your sources of capital as an entrepreneur, but also with a view of what's going to happen with the next round or towards an exit. And in many ways, it's who you know, so you end up doing deals with your friends. Sometimes you enter a deal and you find out that there's somebody else that you know from another fund, or they're already sitting on the board of the company. But ultimately, yeah, it's a very cooperative effort. Some funds are more sharp-elbowed. I think the way, at least we've done business, or our friends at Accel here, whom I know better, sorry, disrespect to my other partners, but you tend to go after people that you know, brands that you know, and see how you can build it out with keeping the company's success in mind, and that's how the best deals happen. And then people look for you for the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And well, this is a green edition of South Summit. Well, and I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have as humanity is the climate change. So are you seeing an increased deal flow of these founders tackling climate change transition to this green economy? So are you seeing movement in this area? Are you investing actively in that?
Happy to take it. I think when I think about sustainability, usually I think about two things. So, first of all, as a theme, I think it's clearly one of the macro trends of our generation, like solving climate change. I think there's no denying that it's one of those mega trends, and there's many ways. So we've invested in a green energy provider called Tiber. We've invested in some ecological household products in the UK. So there are many ways to make investments. I think the other way also I think about sustainability is our impact when we're on board of companies, and a bit broader than just investing in green companies is also which kind of tech companies do we want to be building, right? So what's the impact on the gig economy worker? What's the impact on the teams? And you hear a lot about sometimes like bad stories about startups where the culture is very bad, or where the goods are being flown from the other part of the world and it has a massive carbon impact. So I think it's also another angle we try to think is like, are we pushing the right discussions at the board level to make sure that we're not just investing in something and having a massive carbon impact or a terrible team culture or topics like that?
So you're integrating that. Yeah. Miguel, well, I'm curious. Is this going to be a part of your thesis in Leadwin? Or?
Indeed, I mean, I think it's almost impossible to build a new fund where this is not in the center front, right? I have now two small girls, right, at 10 and 9 years old, and I'm a bit obsessed what my potential grandchildren will tell me, like in 30, 40 years, like when you had the connections and the possibilities to do something for change, what did you do? You created the new app for photos. I don't know. I mean, you had some impact in doing something that made our lives 30 years from now better, right? So, and I think for Leadwin, for the fund, is going to be one central piece, and I like this angle. It's not just about carbon sequestration, which is important. It's about how you ensure more inclusiveness also through technology, and in places like Latin America, this is critical.
Yeah. And back to your question, yes, we're seeing more. I think we're seeing a lot of, personally, I'm seeing a lot of companies now tackling different part of the value chain when it comes to sustainability and ESG, and I think we have seen a lot more activity from a deal front, which is a natural consequence.
And it's also very, very difficult to measure.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of like the big challenge that I think Lucille was also alluding to. So if you take, for instance, like NFTs, the big rave right now, and then when you actually start considering how much energy is required to mint any of those, it's huge, and yet you have some companies that are like finding ways around it, or to make things, I guess more carbon neutral or eco-friendly, but frankly, like anything else, right? Whether you put recycling bins in your office space, it kind of depends on who throws the garbage in the right spot. So it is tough to monitor, and it is tough to ensure which company is truly, I guess, ecologically friendly or ESG compliant.
In a way, I mean, if you want to change the culture of how you do things, it needs to hurt a bit, right? I mean, there needs to be some investments you don't make. If not, it's just a cheesy mantra you put on the wall, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, just to give you a figure about Spain, and I'm curious about knowing your views on that. Well, last year, 2020, we closed like nearly 1 billion euros of investment in Spanish startups. And by the beginning of October, according to Fundación Bankinter, our startups and scale-ups have raised 3 billion euros. So it's like 3 times the amount that we had last year. So it seems that this is accelerating a lot, and the acceleration rates are higher than other ecosystems such as France. So, well, the market is moving and moving faster. But I would like to know if you are looking a bit more at investing in Spain. You have all invested in Spain before. So are you looking more actively into the countries? So I'm going to start here, Oscar.
Okay, so if I may something, I mean, like you tend to look for large markets, right? So, talking about the fundamentals, what's interesting about Spain, obviously, it's a large economy, close to 40 million people. So if you look at Europe, right, you have 5 or 6 countries of that size. The idea of language or the commonality that you have, say, between the UK and then the US, right? You have something somewhat similar with Latin America, although obviously Latin America is in much more of a fractured market with its own issues. Regarding your statistic, it'd be interesting to compare how that matches based on, I guess, investment per capita in some of the other countries. The issue that we do have in Spain fundamentally is that as a macro percentage of R&D over GDP, we're still way behind other European countries, for instance, right? So it's obviously great to have a lot of startups. There's a lot of people who are either being educated in Spain or come from other countries, and it's growing. At the same time, I think there's always a challenge to get talent, more engineers, etc., and that hasn't changed.
Yeah, but I would say that it's not that we were not looking at Spain before. I mean, as you said, right, all of us here, we're just a subgroup of people, but I think ultimately Spain has always been on the map. The way we think about innovation and sourcing is not based on geographies, seriously. It's much more based on either fundamentals of the business that sometimes are more consumer-oriented, and then the size of the market matters. But when it comes to software, for example, you can start your business from anywhere and create a global champion. Of course, you need to be able to attract talent, which remains probably the highest barrier to Spain and to many other European ecosystems. But ultimately, we have seen positive developing. I mean, the level of quality, as I was saying before, not just of entrepreneurs, but of executives among scale-ups, has been going up. And those are the people that are most likely going to start their own business tomorrow, or if not, they will go and join another company tomorrow. So I think this is accelerating here in Spain, for sure.
Yeah, sorry, if I may add, like models that can also travel well, right? Ultimately, you want something that can be global. Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
I don't know if you can add something over there, Miguel? Or?
Being here for the last 15 years, I mean, the evolution has been dramatical. I think this rinse and repeat virtuous circle where somebody starts a company 10 years ago and then has an exit, significant exit in 5 years from now, and then reinvest or create, or as you were saying, the second in command or the third, or the head of engineering then starts their own company. This is this little, I don't like to call them mafias, this little network of trusted peers are now everywhere in Spain. And at some point you have got enough critical mass, right? It's not just one single company doing something really well like Wallapop or Cabify was doing. It's just you see a breed of entrepreneurs and talent and funding and support and even involvement from corporates. So all of that is now happening. So I think this is a market which is really ripe for the taking. And I think we will see many more scale-ups growing internationally, not just in the Spanish market, but not in 5 years' time. We're seeing this right now, next year and the year after.
I think another thing that has happened, which I've seen in France and I think in Spain to a certain extent, is being attractive for startups has started to go in the political agenda. So thinking like, how do we have visas to attract people? And to some extent, I think Brexit helped because everyone thought, okay, we need to also raise and create that ecosystem of talent. But I think those are great discussions, right? To make sure that the visas are welcoming, the laws are good, that the communities, I know Barcelona, Madrid, doing a lot to be attracting talent. So that has helped a lot, I think, as well.
What I would add to what Miguel you were saying, it's not only that the startup ecosystem or the mafias of the startup, it's also the VCs. The VC ecosystem has changed and been professionalized, and it kept growing. And well, people that had gone through a startup, then to a corporate, then to VCs. So it's a question of circulation for sure. And well, this is even a personal question, so I'm curious of knowing your views on this. This would be the last question about the differences of startups in Europe and the US. So is it more difficult to raise startups here, to invest in startups here than in the US? So you are seeing different markets, Oscar. You have seen Asia.
Well, I think there's been like traditionally a lot of early stage capital in Europe and less growth capital, but that's very quickly changing right now. So there's more, I guess, US funds or European funds or newly created funds that are filling in the gap. There's more opportunity, and obviously the space is professionalizing very, very quickly. It's very more crowded in the US in general. And we still, but we have like a beautiful collection of unicorns that are emerging across Europe, and the trend's only there to continue.
Yeah, the gap has been shrinking very quickly. And I think it's very small in my opinion now for certain areas. If I think about the fintech ecosystem in Europe, I think Europe has nothing to really compare negatively against the US, for example. And in other sector, of course, we're still a bit behind, but I think this gap is closing.
And you have, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. Also in enterprise software and many other places, you have got also, I would say, more access to tech talent because competition is so fierce in Silicon Valley or New York. And even now for sales talent, where in New York it's almost impossible to hire great sales people. So you can build global companies from here. And then, of course, you need to be also selling in the US, right? I mean, you need to open an office there. You need to have a strong presence there. But we see all these ambitious European funders who can access to talent funding, international mindset, and they know how to crack different countries early on, and the Americans have not yet, and that becomes, over the years, a competitive advantage. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, well, just we are running out of time. So just to summarize, well, you have these amazing funds that are not only willing to invest in Spain, but they have already done it. So they have gone through that way before. And it's all about talented people. It's all about the vision and trying to tackle trying to attack a great problem. So thank you very much for your time, for your amazing panel.
Thank
so
you.
give them a great applause.
Thank you.